The train was alive with its usual evening chaos. Doors slid open with a mechanical sigh, releasing a wave of weary office workers onto the platform, while another wave pressed in to take their places. The compartment smelled faintly of rain-soaked jackets, fried street food from the vendors outside, and the metallic tang of old steel. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting the compartment in a pale, restless glow. Evelyn had claimed her favorite spot by the window, a corner seat where she could disappear into her own world. Her sketchbook rested on her lap, the cover worn smooth from years of use, and a sharpened pencil danced restlessly between her fingers. She had been sketching people on trains for months, turning strangers into lines and shadows, preserving fleeting lives on pages that only she would ever see. She scanned the compartment, an elderly woman dozing against the glass, her hands clutching a plastic bag filled with vegetables, a group of college boys laughing too loudly, a man scrolling on his phone with a furrowed brow as if the screen held his whole existence. Evelyn's eyes moved quickly, hunting for the next face to capture. Then she saw him. He had just boarded at the last stop, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened as though it had been strangling him all day. His shoulders sagged with the kind of exhaustion that only comes from endless routines. Yet his expression wasn't bitter. It was soft, almost patient. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, even as he fought his way to an empty seat directly across from her. Evelyn didn't know why she reached for her pencil. Something about him, the slope of his jaw, the tired kindness in his eyes, the way he rubbed his palms together as if trying to stay awake, pulled her in. Her hand began to move instinctively, sketching the curve of his profile, the way a loose strand of hair fell across his forehead. She wasn't subtle. She never was. And soon his gaze shifted. Arjun, though she didn't yet know his name, looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a second, Evelyn's breath caught. She expected annoyance, maybe even a sharp word about invading his privacy. But instead, he tilted his head slightly, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Are you drawing me?" he asked, his voice carrying a low warmth that cut through the buzz of the compartment. Evelyn froze, pencil hovering mid-stroke. Her cheeks flushed a shade darker than the red scarf wrapped around her neck. It's just a habit," she stammered. "Faces, people, you looked interesting." His smile widened, though fatigue still lingered in his eyes. "Interesting? That's a polite way of saying tired and disheveled." She laughed softly and lowered her gaze back to her sketchbook. "No, not at all. You have character. Lines worth capturing." "Lines worth capturing?" He leaned back in his seat, amusement flickering across his face. "Well then, if you're going to immortalize me on paper, at least make me look a little more handsome. I've had a rough day." The train jolted forward, rattling over the tracks. Evelyn gripped her pencil tighter to steady it, though the smile on her lips made it difficult to concentrate. She added a softer curve to his mouth, adjusted the tilt of his eyes, and without realizing it, sketched the smile he was giving her now. "What's your name?" he asked after a pause, his voice quieter this time, meant only for her amidst the noise of the compartment. "Evelyn." "Arjun," he said, extending his hand slightly before thinking better of it, given how tightly she clutched her pencil. Instead, he let his arm drop back to his side with a chuckle. "So Evelyn the artist, do you do this often? Collecting strangers' faces?" She shrugged, her pencil still scratching against the paper. "It's easier than trying to collect their stories. Faces tell enough, if you know how to look." Arjun nodded, his gaze lingering on her sketchbook. "And what will mine say when you're done?" Evelyn lifted her head, meeting his eyes for just a moment too long. "That you're tired," she said softly, "but not defeated. That even when the day wears you down, there's still a light left in you." For once he didn't know how to reply. He only sat back, exhaling slowly, as if her words had reached deeper than he expected. The train rumbled on, carrying them through the city's veins, and Evelyn's pencil moved until the sketch was complete. She tore the page carefully from the book, hesitated for a moment, and then slid it across to him. "Here," she said, "something to remind you that even when you feel tired, someone saw more." Arjun took the page, his fingers brushing against hers, and for the first time that day, the weight on his shoulders seemed just a little lighter. The train lurched again, a steady rhythm of wheels grinding against tracks filling the silence between them. Arjun sat with the sketch in his hands, his thumb brushing over the pencil strokes as though he might smudge them into something more real. He studied it carefully, the way one might examine their reflection in a mirror they weren't entirely ready to face. "It's good," he said finally, glancing up at her with that same faint smile. "Too good, actually. Makes me look like I've got secrets." "Do you?" Evelyn asked, arching one brow. Her pencil hovered just above her sketchbook, as if ready to capture him again, not on paper this time, but in memory. He leaned back against the seat, staring at the advertisements pasted above the windows. "Maybe not secrets, just long days that all blur together." "Sounds like you're letting life swallow you whole," she said, her tone light, but her eyes steady. Arjun chuckled softly. "I think that's just called being an adult. Office at 9, endless emails, back on this train by 7. Rinse and repeat until retirement." Evelyn tilted her head, her curls catching the light of the carriage. "That's depressing. I refuse to believe that's all you are. There's more. There always is." He looked at her, properly looked, as though no one had ever challenged him to be more than his routine. Her presence was disarming. The way she seemed to see past his loosened tie and tired eyes straight into something he hadn't realized he was hiding. "What about you?" he asked, eager to turn the spotlight. "You sit here sketching strangers. Is that your job? Or just your way of making time less boring?" She laughed, the sound gentle but bright enough to stand out against the hum of the train. "I wish it were my job. No, I like to capture pieces of people, the way they exist in a single moment. You'd be surprised how much life fits into a pair of eyes, or the slump of shoulders, or the way someone fiddles with their hands." Arjun nodded, his gaze dropping instinctively to his own hands, still rubbing together from habit. "So what did you capture about me? Other than the fact that I look like I need a week of sleep?" Her lips curved into a secretive smile. "That you're more awake than you let yourself believe. That there's something you're waiting for, even if you don't know what it is." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, startled by her accuracy. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she was just skilled at reading faces. But something about her words sank deep, as though she'd pressed gently on an old bruise. The train slowed at another station, and a rush of passengers piled in, their chatter filling the compartment. For a moment, the world around them grew chaotic again, people brushing past, announcements blaring overhead, a baby crying somewhere down the carriage. Yet amidst it all, their little corner felt untouched, as though they were sitting inside a quiet bubble between stops. "You ever wonder," Evelyn said, breaking the moment, "how many stories we pass every day without knowing them? Hundreds of faces on this train, each carrying something we'll never get to hear. It's like living inside a library but never opening the books." Arjun studied her, half amused, half fascinated. "You think a lot on trains, don't you?" "Someone has to," she teased. "Otherwise they're just noisy metal boxes taking us from one tired place to another." He laughed, and for the first time in a long while, the sound felt genuine even to him. The train jolted again, sending Evelyn's pencil rolling off her lap. Arjun bent quickly, catching it before it hit the floor. When he handed it back, their fingers brushed, an innocent accident, but the kind that left a lingering electricity neither could quite ignore. "Thanks," she murmured, her cheeks warming. "Least I could do. You did give me a free portrait, after all." He held up the page, then carefully folded it and slid it into the pocket of his notebook. "I'll keep this. Proof that someone once thought I had character," her smile softened. "Not just someone. Me." For a moment their eyes locked, and the noise of the train seemed to fade. He didn't know her beyond a name, a laugh, and a sketch, but already he felt as though he'd stumbled into something rare, like finding a note tucked between pages of a forgotten book, written just for him. The train pulled into the next stop, and Evelyn glanced toward the door. For a heartbeat, Arjun worried she might leave, that this fragile connection would vanish as suddenly as it began. But she didn't move. She stayed in her seat, her sketchbook open, pencil poised once more. "Another?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though relief fluttered quietly in his chest. She smirked, eyes glinting. Maybe. But only if you promise to give me more than just tired eyes this time. And as the train pulled away again, carrying them deeper into the night, Arjun found himself leaning forward, ready, perhaps for the first time in years, to be seen. The week stretched into a rhythm neither of them could name, but both began to crave. Every evening train brought the possibility of seeing each other again. Sometimes Arjun spotted her first, curled in her window seat, already sketching as though she'd been waiting for him. Other times, Evelyn would glance up and find him pushing through the crowd, scanning the compartment until his eyes landed on her, softening with relief. It was unspoken but undeniable. They had begun to look for each other. One evening, the skies opened up just as Arjun left the office. The rain poured in sheets, the kind that blurred the world into gray smudges, and the streets shimmered with puddles reflecting neon lights. He arrived at the platform drenched, his umbrella useless against the downpour. But when he spotted Evelyn sitting there, sketchbook balanced delicately on her knees, none of that seemed to matter. She looked up as he approached, her curls damp at the edges, cheeks flushed from the cold. "You look like you wrestled with the storm and lost," she teased, eyes sparkling. Arjun ran a hand through his soaked hair, chuckling. "Storm had the upper hand today. Thought I'd surprise you, but I see you're dry as ever." "I got here early," she said, tapping the umbrella propped beside her. "Artists know how to outsmart the rain." He shook his head, laughing. Then, as if remembering something, he set his bag down and pulled out 2 steaming cups of coffee, still warm despite the weather. He handed one to her. "For you," he said simply. "I figured it's about time I contributed something, instead of just sitting here while you sketch me like one of your, projects." She accepted the cup with a grin. "Sketch subject, not project, and this is bribery, you know. You're trying to earn better lines in your portrait." "Guilty," he admitted, raising his cup in mock salute. "But if it works, I won't complain." The train rattled into motion, rain streaking against the glass, each droplet catching the glow of street lamps outside. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and wet clothes. Evelyn held the cup close, her fingers wrapped around it like it was the only source of warmth in the world. They sat side by side this time, the closeness unspoken, but natural. Their shoulders brushed when the train jolted, and neither moved away. Instead, Arjun leaned slightly toward her, watching her sketchbook fill with lines that seemed to move even as she drew them. "What are you drawing?" he asked softly. "The rain," she replied, not lifting her eyes from the page. "The way it turns the city into something softer, like a watercolor painting that never dries." Arjun followed her gaze to the window. He'd never thought of rain as anything but an inconvenience. Wet socks, slippery roads, traffic jams. But through her eyes, through her words, it became something else. Beautiful, almost magical. "You make everything sound like it belongs in a painting," he said, his voice tinged with awe. She glanced at him then, her smile quieter this time. "Maybe I just like reminding myself that the world still has beauty, even when it tries to hide." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Arjun wanted to ask what she meant, what shadows lingered behind her words, but he stopped himself, afraid to break the fragile ease they had found together. Instead, he sipped his coffee, letting the warmth settle into him. The train slowed at a station, and Evelyn closed her sketchbook, tucking it into her bag. She looked at him, her expression softer than usual. "You know you're different on days like this." "Different how?" "Less tired. Like the rain washed something off you." He thought about that, surprised. Maybe she was right. Sitting here, sharing coffee with her while the storm raged outside, he didn't feel like just another commuter dragging himself through life. He felt awake, seen. "Maybe it's not the rain," he said quietly. "Maybe it's you." Evelyn blinked, her lips parting as if she might respond. But before she could, the train jolted again, filling the silence with mechanical noise. She looked away, cheeks tinged pink, and pressed her hands tighter around the coffee cup. They rode like that the rest of the way, side by side, the rain their soundtrack, coffee warming their palms. Words were few, but neither needed them. The rhythm of the train, the comfort of shared silence, and the soft hum of something unspoken building between them were enough. When the train finally screeched into their stop, Arjun held out his umbrella. "Here, let me walk you out." Evelyn eyed it with mock suspicion. "Even though you clearly lost to the storm?" He grinned. "Maybe I'll do better if I'm not walking alone." And so they stepped into the rain together, side by side under one umbrella, laughter rising above the storm. The nights were growing cooler, the kind of evenings when the city exhaled a little slower, and the train felt less like a machine and more like a heartbeat. Weeks had passed since Arjun first sat across from Evelyn, and by now the rhythm of their meetings had woven itself into the fabric of their days. What once felt like chance had become something they couldn't imagine living without. That evening, the train was quieter than usual. A late hour had thinned the crowd, leaving most of the seats empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed above them, throwing faint halos across the window glass. Evelyn sat by the window again, her sketchbook open but blank. Arjun noticed she hadn't drawn since they boarded, her pencil lying idle across the page. "You're not sketching tonight?" he asked, his voice gentle, as though not wanting to disturb the stillness. She shook her head, staring out at the blurred city lights streaking past. "Some nights don't need lines. They just need to be felt." Arjun watched her reflection in the window, the thoughtful crease of her brow, the way her fingers tapped the edge of the book. She seemed more fragile tonight, though still wrapped in that quiet strength he admired. He hesitated before speaking again. "I was thinking," he began, eyes fixed on the darkened glass, "that maybe this isn't just about the train anymore." She turned to him, brows lifting slightly. "What do you mean?" He swallowed, words tangling in his chest. It had been building for days now, the way his heart raced when he spotted her on the platform, the ache he felt when he imagined missing even a single ride with her. He hadn't wanted to admit it, afraid that saying it out loud might break the fragile spell they'd been living in. But tonight, in the soft hum of the carriage, the truth pressed too hard to be ignored. "I think," he paused, his throat dry, "I think I'm falling for you, Evelyn." The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Evelyn blinked, her lips parting as if she hadn't expected to hear them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Her pencil slipped from her lap and clattered softly to the floor, but neither of them moved to pick it up. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the clatter of wheels over tracks, steady and unrelenting. Arjun felt his chest tighten, fear gnawing at the edges of his confession. Maybe he had spoken too soon. Maybe he had misread the glances, the laughter, the electricity in the space between them. But then, slowly, she smiled. Not her usual teasing grin, not the polite curve she gave to strangers. This smile was smaller, quieter, trembling at the corners, but it held something raw and unguarded. "You don't have to think," she whispered, "because I already know. I already have." The words fell from her lips like a secret she'd been waiting to share. Relief and wonder collided inside Arjun's chest, leaving him breathless. Before he could reply, before he could even think, she leaned forward, closing the small space between them. Her lips brushed his, tentative at first, like the question mark at the end of a long sentence. Then, as though assured of the answer, she kissed him more fully. The train rattled on, indifferent to the two souls inside it who had just crossed a line neither could step back from. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn's eyes searched his, wide and vulnerable. "I didn't plan for this," she admitted. "You were supposed to just be another face in my sketchbook, a stranger I'd capture and then forget." Arjun touched her hand where it rested on her lap, his fingers curling gently around hers. "I don't want to be a face you forget." Her breath caught, and she squeezed his hand back, a silent promise. The train slowed as it approached another station, but neither moved. Passengers shuffled in and out, filling the compartment briefly with noise, but Arjun and Evelyn stayed locked in their quiet corner, their world untouched. When the train started again, Evelyn rested her head lightly against his shoulder. The movement felt natural, inevitable, as if all the nights before had been leading here. Arjun leaned into her, letting the weight of her presence settle into him, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "I'm scared," she murmured after a while, so quietly he almost missed it. "Of what?" "Of how quickly this feels like everything." Arjun closed his eyes, resting his cheek against her hair. "Me too, but maybe that's what makes it real." And as the city blurred outside, as the tracks carried them forward into a future neither could name, they sat together in the dim glow of the carriage, two people who had found love in the fleeting minutes between stations, knowing it was both fragile and infinite all at once. The weeks that followed felt like stolen treasures. Each day began the same. Emails, meetings, the monotony of Arjun's office life. But every evening ended in something magical. The moment he stepped onto the platform and saw Evelyn waiting, sketchbook on her lap, he felt as though he'd been granted a reprieve from the dullness of the world. The train became theirs. No matter how crowded, no matter how loud, in their corner of the carriage it always felt like a quiet sanctuary. Evelyn would sketch, and Arjun would tell her about his day, mundane details that suddenly felt worth sharing, because she listened as though every word mattered. In turn, she revealed pieces of her world, half-finished drawings, memories of a childhood spent filling margins of schoolbooks with doodles, dreams of traveling to places she had only ever painted. One evening, when the city was awash in golden. "Twilight?" Evelyn tore a page from her sketchbook and handed it to him. It wasn't a portrait this time. It was a house, small, simple, with climbing roses on the walls and a little window overlooking a garden. "Our dream house," she announced with mock seriousness. Arjun studied it, laughter tugging at his lips. "That chimney looks taller than the house itself," she swatted his arm playfully. "It's charming. Can't you see it? A tiny cottage, tucked away from everything, where no one can bother us." He looked again, this time not at the flaws in the lines, but at the hope etched into them. "I can see it," he said softly. "I can see you there." Her teasing smile softened into something more tender, and for a fleeting moment, the train around them seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of them and a sketch of a future they hadn't dared to imagine before. They began to meet outside the train, as if the boundaries of their world could no longer be contained by metal walls and station stops. On Sundays, Arjun would wait for her outside her apartment with 2 cups of coffee, and they would wander through the park, her hand sometimes brushing his, then lingering, then curling around his fingers as though it had always belonged there. Once, during a light drizzle, they walked beneath the canopy of trees, rain dripping from the leaves like liquid pearls. Evelyn tilted her head back, eyes closed, arms stretched wide. "You know what I love about rain?" she asked. Arjun shook his head, smiling at her freedom. "It makes the world pause. Everyone hides away, waiting for it to stop. But if you stay out in it, you get to live while everyone else is waiting." He stepped closer, brushing a damp curl from her forehead. "You're not afraid of storms, are you?" She opened her eyes, her smile tinged with mystery. "Storms are only scary if you don't learn to dance in them." And so, under that quiet drizzle, they danced. Not gracefully, not in rhythm, but with laughter that echoed through the park like music. Late one night, they sat in a cafe long after most of the customers had gone. Arjun leaned across the table, chin propped on his hand, watching Evelyn sketch on a napkin. "What are you drawing now?" She slid the napkin toward him. It was a little cartoon version of them. Him with his tie crooked, her with curls flying everywhere, both of them sitting on their beloved train. Above them, she had scribbled in messy letters, "Always between stations." Arjun laughed, his chest tightening at the same time. "You make it sound like we don't exist outside the train." She met his gaze, serious now. "Maybe that's the beauty of it. Time stops for us there. Between stations, it's just you and me." He reached across, covering her hand with his. Then maybe we should stop pretending it's only about the train. Her eyes softened, and she didn't pull away. They talked about everything and nothing. Future trips they would take, Paris in the spring, Kyoto in the fall, even the simple joy of seeing the ocean together someday. Evelyn's eyes lit up when she spoke of painting cliffsides at sunrise, while Arjun found himself promising things he never thought he'd dare promise before. Vacations, shared mornings, forever. But amidst all the laughter, there were moments too quiet, too fragile. Times when Evelyn would stare at him a second longer than necessary, as if memorizing him. Times when her smile trembled just a little before it steadied. Arjun noticed, but he told himself it was nothing, just tricks of the moment, shadows where there was only light. For now, they had their sketches, their laughter, their coffee, and their shared dreams. For now, the story was still theirs to build. And as the train rattled on each night, Evelyn would sometimes press her head against his shoulder, whispering into the hum of the carriage, "Promise me this will last." Arjun would close his eyes, holding her hand tight. "As long as the trains keep running," he'd reply. And she would smile, though in her heart, she already knew. Trains don't run forever. They had spent the afternoon wandering the old book market near the station, Evelyn weaving through stalls with her sketchbook tucked under her arm, while Arjun trailed behind, carrying the extra bag of coffee beans she had insisted on buying. She was laughing at something he'd said, her curls bouncing as she turned to look at him. When suddenly her steps faltered. Her pencil clattered to the ground, and before Arjun could react, she pressed a hand against her chest, her face pale, her breath uneven. "Evelyn?" His voice was sharp with panic. He rushed to her side, steadying her by the shoulders. She tried to brush it off with a shaky smile. "I'm fine, just a little dizzy." But her legs trembled, and in the next instant she collapsed into his arms. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and something heavier. Fear that lingered in the hallways like smoke. Arjun paced the waiting area, his shirt damp from rain and sweat, his mind a storm of questions. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. At work, problems had solutions, emails had answers. But here, waiting for news about Evelyn, there was nothing to fix, only the unbearable weight of not knowing. When the doctor finally emerged, Arjun hurried forward. "She's all right, isn't she? Tell me she's all right." The doctor hesitated, his face composed in the professional calm that always seemed more terrifying than anger. "She's stable now, but she has a pre-existing condition, a congenital heart defect." The words hit Arjun like a blow. He blinked, as if trying to clear them from his ears. "A what?" the doctor explained. Complications she'd likely known about for years, limitations on what her heart could bear, the importance of medication and careful monitoring. She should have told someone close to her, the doctor added gently. "It's not something she can carry alone." Arjun's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Alone. She had carried this alone while laughing with him on trains, sketching futures in ink and paper, dancing with him in the rain. She had carried this secret like a shadow pressed close to her chest. When he entered her hospital room, Evelyn was sitting upright, sketchbook in hand, pencil moving quietly across the page. She looked up when he walked in, her smile soft but tired. "You didn't have to wait. I told them I'm fine." Arjun stared at her, anger and fear battling in his chest. "Fine? Evelyn, you collapsed. They said you knew. You've known all along." Her pencil stilled. She lowered the sketchbook slowly, her eyes dropping to her lap. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of machines. "Yes," she said finally. "I've known." His voice cracked when he spoke again. "Why didn't you tell me?" She met his eyes then, and what he saw broke him more than any diagnosis. the quiet resignation, the sorrow threaded through her courage. Because I didn't want you to look at me differently. I didn't want to be your burden. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I'm losing. Arjun stepped closer, his chest aching. Evelyn, don't you see? You are not a burden. Not to me. Never to me. Her hands tightened around the sketchbook, as though it could anchor her. You say that now. But what about when I can't keep up? When the world I've drawn for us, our cottage, our travels, all of it, becomes impossible. You'll be left with nothing but half-finished dreams. He sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for her hand. It was cold, fragile, but still alive, still hers. Then I'll take half-finished dreams over a life without you. I'll take a minute with you over years of emptiness. Tears welled in her eyes, sliding down her cheeks despite the way she tried to blink them back. Arjun, he pressed her hand against his chest, letting her feel the steady thud of his heart. As long as this beats, you're not alone. Don't you dare shut me out. For a moment, she looked at him as though she might protest again. But then her defenses crumbled, and she leaned into him, her forehead resting against his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as though he could shield her from everything. Even time. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, he murmured into her hair. But we'll be scared together. And though the hospital walls still pressed in around them, though the weight of her secret had changed everything, Arjun realized that love was not about escaping shadows. It was about choosing to walk through them, hand in hand, no matter how heavy the night became. Life didn't return to normal after the hospital. It couldn't. Every heartbeat was louder now, every quiet moment sharper, every laugh tinged with the knowledge of its fragility. Yet somehow, in the shadow of Evelyn's illness, their love only grew deeper, burning brighter against the darkness that threatened it. Arjun became her constant, her anchor. He learned how to measure out her medication, how to keep an eye on her when she grew too pale, how to coax her into resting even when she insisted she was fine. But more than that, he learned how to fill her days with light. They started small rituals. Every morning before work, Arjun would stop at the little bakery near the station and buy her favorite almond croissant. He'd leave it at her door if she was too tired to come down, sometimes with a silly doodle of his own on a sticky note, his terrible attempt at sketching. Evelyn would tease him mercilessly later, but she kept every note tucked inside her sketchbook. In the evenings, he still met her on the train whenever she was well enough to come. Sometimes they rode only a few stops before she tired, but those short rides became treasures, stretches of time where the world belonged only to them. Evelyn would rest her head on his shoulder, whispering stories about the strangers they passed, the woman with the bright scarf who was secretly a novelist, the boy in uniform who dreamed of being a pilot, the man in glasses who always carried flowers but never gave them to anyone. Arjun listened, enchanted not by her stories but by the sound of her voice, soft and alive beside him. On weekends, when she had strength, they would explore little corners of the city together. Not grand adventures, just simple joys. A hidden cafe tucked down a cobbled alley, where she sketched the barista's crooked smile, while Arjun read aloud from a book of poetry. A quiet park bench by the lake, where they fed ducks stale bread and joked about who was secretly the greediest bird. Sometimes they didn't go anywhere at all. They stayed in her apartment, Evelyn sprawled on the floor with pencils scattered around her, while Arjun sat against the wall, watching her draw. He never got tired of it, the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her fingers smudged with graphite, the way she breathed life into paper with every line. Once, he asked her, "Why do you sketch so much?" She looked up, smiling faintly. "Because paper remembers when people don't. Because when my hands stop one day, maybe these lines will still speak." His throat tightened, but he forced a smile. "Then you'd better draw me enough times that I'll never forget either." She laughed, reaching for his face as if framing him in her mind. "Don't worry, you're my favorite subject. But not every day was light. There were nights Evelyn woke up breathless, her chest aching. Fear etched across her face. Arjun held her through them, whispering reassurances even when his own heart shook with terror. There were days she couldn't leave her bed, and he would read to her for hours, novels, newspapers, even silly comic strips, until she drifted off with her head against his lap. And yet, through it all, there was no pity in his love, only devotion. One evening, as the sunset bled pink across her living room walls, Arjun found her sketching again. This time it wasn't strangers or dream houses, it was him. Dozens of sketches of him, smiling, frowning, laughing, lost in thought, as if she was trying to capture every version of him before time slipped away. "Why so many of me?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. She hesitated, then said, "Because I want you to remember how I saw you. Even if one day you have to look without me." The words broke something inside him. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Don't you dare talk like that. We're not counting days, Evelyn. We're living them. Every single one." Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. "Then let's make them beautiful." So they did. They filled their time with sketches and laughter, with stolen kisses on platforms, with whispered promises under street lamps. They lived not as if the future stretched endlessly ahead, but as if each moment could be their last. And strangely, in those days of uncertainty, their love felt more infinite than ever. Proof that sometimes, the most fragile hearts carried the strongest fire. The evening was heavy with silence, as though the city itself knew what was about to unfold. A thin rain drizzled down the windows of Evelyn's apartment, the glass streaked with silver trails. Arjun sat by her side, his hand wrapped around hers, listening to the uneven rhythm of her breathing. Evelyn had grown weaker in the past weeks. Her laughter came less often, her steps shorter, her sketchbook filling with more unfinished drawings than complete ones. But her eyes, they still carried the same light, though softer now, like the last glow of a candle before it flickers out. That night, she turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Arjun, I want to ride the train again." "Just once more," he froze, his grip tightening on her hand. "Evelyn, you're not strong enough." "The doctor—" She shook her head gently, silencing him with that fragile determination he'd come to know so well. "Please, it's where we began." "It's where I want it to end too. Just one last ride." Arjun's throat burned. Every part of him wanted to protest, to wrap her in blankets, to keep her safe from anything that could hasten what was already inevitable. But when he saw the way her eyes pleaded with him, he couldn't deny her. He had never been able to. "All right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "One last ride." They left just after dusk, the city wrapped in a quiet veil of mist. Arjun supported her carefully down the stairs, her fingers clutching his arm. She wore her favorite scarf, the soft burgundy one he had bought her months ago, which she insisted made her look like a painter in Paris. Her sketchbook was tucked against her chest, though he knew she didn't have the strength to draw tonight. When they stepped onto the platform, Evelyn closed her eyes, inhaling deeply as though breathing in the memory of every journey they had ever shared. The train pulled in with its familiar hum, doors sliding open like a heartbeat welcoming them back. They chose their corner, the one that had been theirs from the beginning. The seats creaked as they sat down, and the train lurched forward, carrying them into the night. Evelyn leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Her voice was soft but steady. "Do you remember the first time you sat here with me? You were so nervous. I thought you'd run off at the next stop." Arjun smiled through the ache in his chest. "And miss meeting you? Not a chance." She chuckled faintly, her breath warm against him. "You changed everything, you know. You made the world feel worth sketching again." He kissed the top of her head, eyes stinging. "You made it worth living." The train rattled on, its windows filled with streaks of neon and blurred lights. But inside, time seemed to slow, the world shrinking down to the two of them. Evelyn lifted her hand weakly and pointed toward the dark glass. "Look, the city looks like a watercolor tonight, all smudged and running together. I wish I had the strength to capture it." "You've already captured everything that matters." Arjun whispered, squeezing her hand. She turned her face toward him, her eyes glistening. Promise me something, Arjun. Anything. When I'm gone, don't stop riding the train. Keep sitting in this seat. Sketch in my place if you have to. Just don't forget us. Don't let time stop here. Tears slipped down his cheeks before he could stop them. I could never forget. Not in 1,000 lifetimes. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and she closed her eyes again, nestling closer against him. The rhythm of the tracks carried them forward, steady and relentless. For a while they sat in silence. Arjun listened to her breathing, uneven but still there, clinging stubbornly to each moment. He held her tighter, as if his arms could keep her tethered to this world a little longer. And then, somewhere between stations, Evelyn's breathing grew softer, slower, until it stilled completely. The train carried on, its wheels singing on the tracks, oblivious to the shattering silence in their corner. Arjun sat frozen, her head still resting on his shoulder, her hand still in his. It felt as though the world had stopped, yet the train continued forward, heartless, unstoppable. When the train slowed at the next station, passengers bustled in and out, laughter and chatter filling the air. But in that corner, time had ceased. Arjun pressed his forehead against hers, his tears falling freely now. You were my beginning, and my end, he whispered. When the train stops, so does time. And as the doors closed again, the train moved on into the night, carrying with it a love story that would never truly arrive at its final destination. Months had passed since that night, yet for Arjun, time still felt caught between stations. The world outside moved on. Meetings were scheduled. Festivals came and went. Strangers hurried past him on platforms. But his heart still lingered in the dim glow of a train carriage, where Evelyn's head had once rested on his shoulder. He rode the train often now. At first, it was torture. The sight of their corner seat, the echo of her laughter and the rattle of wheels, the empty space beside him where she should have been. But over time, the train became something else. A memory, yes, but also a thread, a way of holding her close, even in her absence. Every evening, when his office hours ended, he found himself drifting back to the platform. The routine had outlived her, and yet it tethered him to her spirit. One night, as the train hummed to life, Arjun opened Evelyn's old sketchbook. He had carried it with him since her last day, unable to let it out of his sight. The pages smelled faintly of graphite and lavender. Her scent. He flipped through the sketches. Strangers' faces caught in quick strokes. The dream cottage with its oversized chimney, caricatures of him with his crooked tie and tired eyes, and then the last drawing, unfinished. It was of the two of them, side by side, but she had left herself half-sketched, her outline fading into white space, as if she had known she wouldn't have the time to complete it. Arjun traced the lines with his fingers, his chest tightening. You always leave me unfinished, don't you? He whispered, though his voice broke halfway. He tucked the sketchbook back into his bag, then pulled out something new, a blank notebook, a pencil resting across it. Evelyn's final request echoed in his ears. Sketch in my place if you have to, so he began. Awkward lines at first, clumsy and shaky, but with every ride, he drew something new. The tired eyes of a commuter, the curve of neon lights on rain-washed glass, the memory of Evelyn's smile. His drawings were never as graceful as hers, but it didn't matter. Each mark was a conversation with her, each page another way of keeping her alive. Seasons shifted. The leaves outside the train windows turned from green to amber, then to bare winter branches. Arjun still came, still drew, still sat in their corner. Some nights, passengers glanced at him curiously, wondering why he always chose the same seat, why he sketched with such quiet intensity. He never explained. How could he? But sometimes, just sometimes, he swore he felt her there. The faint weight of a head against his shoulder, the ghost of laughter carried by the hum of the train. He would close his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him, and whisper into the empty air, I'm still here. I'm keeping my promise. On the anniversary of her passing, Arjun boarded the train with something different in hand, a a small bundle wrapped in twine. Inside were her sketches, every page of her sketchbook, carefully preserved, along with his own scattered attempts at drawing. When the train reached the station where they had first met, he stood and walked to the platform. The night was cool, the lamps throwing golden halos on the wet pavement. He sat on a bench, unwrapped the bundle, and spread the drawings out beside him. Faces, dreams, a cottage with climbing roses. Two lovers captured in pencil lines, their whole story told in graphite and paper. Arjun smiled through his tears. "You see, Evelyn?" I kept sketching. I didn't stop. He gathered the pages again, tied them carefully, and placed them beneath the bench, a quiet offering to time itself. Maybe a stranger would find them one day, maybe not. It didn't matter. What mattered was that their love was there, pressed into the world, etched into lines no rain could wash away. As he boarded the train once more, Arjun looked out at the city rushing past. For the first time, the blur of lights didn't feel like loss. It felt like motion. As if Evelyn herself was still carrying him forward, whispering that love doesn't end when the heart stops. He rested his hand on the empty seat beside him. "Between stations," he murmured, smiling softly. "Always." And as the train rolled on into the night, Arjun realized Evelyn had been right all along. Time may stop, but love, once found, keeps traveling forever. It was late, long after most commuters had gone home, when Arjun sat once more in their corner seat. The train hummed beneath him, rocking gently on its steel tracks, carrying him forward as it always had. Outside, the city blurred into ribbons of gold and shadow, familiar yet distant, a backdrop to a love story that had been lived, lost and carried on in memory. The seat beside him remained empty, but it no longer felt like absence. It felt like presence, like Evelyn still leaned into him, her sketchbook balanced on her lap, her laughter tucked into the rhythm of the rails. Arjun opened his own notebook. Its pages were filled now, line after line, sketch after sketch. Not perfect, not graceful, but alive. They told the story of Evelyn as she had been. Not the girl defined by her illness, but the woman who saw beauty in the ordinary, who taught him how to live, as if every breath was both fleeting and infinite. He smiled faintly as he turned to the very last page. Tonight he had saved it for something special. Slowly, carefully, he drew their corner seat side by side. This time he filled the space Evelyn had left blank. He finished the outline she had abandoned, her soft curls, her bright eyes, her quiet smile. It was not her hand that completed it, but it was her spirit, guiding his. When he finished, he sat back, tears blurring his vision. But for the first time, they did not ache. They felt like rain after a drought, cleansing and warm. The train slowed at a station, doors sliding open. A young woman stepped inside, clutching a sketchbook of her own, her eyes scanning the nearly empty carriage. For a moment, their gazes met. She offered him a polite nod before choosing a seat across the aisle. Arjun returned the nod, his smile gentle. He didn't speak, didn't reach across the silence as he once had with Evelyn. Some connections only come once in a lifetime, and he had found his. But as the train began to move again, he realized that maybe Evelyn's gift had not just been their love. Maybe it was the reminder that strangers could hold whole worlds, that stories could bloom in the quiet corners between stops. And in that realization, he felt her with him again, whispering, laughing, sketching, always. Arjun closed his notebook and pressed his hand against its cover. "Between stations," he murmured into the hum of the train. "Always between stations." The city outside continued to rush past, neon lights smearing into watercolor, the tracks stretching endlessly forward. For the first time in a long while, he did not dread where they led. He simply let himself be carried, trusting that Evelyn's memory would ride with him to every stop, every turn, every ending. Love, he understood now, did not need permanence to be eternal. It did not need forever to be infinite. It simply needed to be real, and theirs had been real. The train rumbled on, passengers shifting in their seats, lives colliding briefly before parting again. In one small corner, Arjun sat with a heart that was broken, yes, but also full of laughter, sketches, rain dances, and whispered promises. Full of a love that time could not silence no matter how many stations passed. Somewhere, he imagined Evelyn smiling, her pencil poised, ready to capture him one last time. And with that thought, he closed his eyes, letting the world blur around him, letting the rhythm of the train carry him forward into the unknown, where she would always wait for him just between stations.